Welcome to the Balance Sheet, where you rise above the noise and learn about the most important business issues of our age. I'm your host and fellow student, Conrad Chua. Today's episode is a special one for me because it's about the music industry. Music is a constant companion for me, whether that's playing in the background or something I'm consciously listening to. But the economics of the music industry has changed so much because of technology. First, it was iTunes and then streaming. It means that you don't have to buy a physical record. You only pay for what you listen to. And that has affected artists tremendously. Here to tell us how the music industry works is Mira Howard, head of the Song Fund in Snafu Records. Mira has experienced scaling media and music businesses. So welcome, Mira.
Hi, thank you.
Mira, you're a fellow music lover. So what was your earliest music memory?
That's a great question. I have a few, but one that I think is kind of a funny one was growing up. My mom was from India, so we would go to India and we'd stay at these hotels, and there'd often be like live bands. And this one band was playing the Backstreet Boys, like a cover, and I was maybe four, and I just stood up and gave them a standing ovation, and I wanted to meet the band afterwards, and I was like, "Wow, guys, phenomenal job." Like, so that's one of my earlier memories of really loving music.
And have you seen the Backstreet Boys in real life?
I have not, unfortunately. That
Oh,
would be
okay.
awesome though.
Since then, what kind of music do you like to listen to?
Oh, I feel like the best answer to that question is my answer, which is all kinds. I think I grew up playing classical piano, and so I always have a piano in my apartment, no matter where in the world I am. So I do love classical music, but I love flamenco music from Spain. I love Latin music. I love rock. I love hip hop. I love pop. So all kinds of music.
I think we could talk about music forever, but let's
Yeah.
get down to the business side. First,
Okay.
for most of us who just listen to music, we don't know what the the business angle is. So could you help us by explaining what is a record label or a record company?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think an interesting little fact about record labels is, even if you look at the word like record label, it's such a physical descriptor, right? And actually, the first record labels were founded in the late 1800s, and they were distributors of Edison phonographs. So as they started to grow and become the distributors of this tool by which you listen to music, then they started to simultaneously, start to actually sell the discs that were played. And then they started to source the artists. So there was this evolution where, like in the 20s, 30s, 40s, they started to actually find the talent, finance the making of the music, and then finance the creation of the labels and the sales. And then they became super powerful. I would say the heyday of the record industry was like the 90s, where it was still very physical. And then today, their role has really evolved since the advent of streaming, where now they still create music, distribute music, and market music. And it is still an oligopoly. Like there are three major labels that dominate the scene. But because of this like sort of democratization of distribution and even now music creation, their role has kind of changed a little bit to becoming almost like a bank and a promotion service.
That's a great example, and I think from strategy, it's a great example of vertical integration and then disintermediating into different parts of a business. You described how the companies now make money, but how do artists gain revenue?
Yeah. Well, you and I were talking about it a little bit before the beginning of this, but the answers to that question vary depending on market. But I'll kind of give like an outline of the top ways. Obviously, the most obvious one is streaming, like music sales, streaming. whether that's actually someone downloading the song from iTunes or buying an album or streaming the song on Spotify. That's one major source of income for artists. I would say you can see with Taylor Swift and Beyonce, another probably more, revenue driving one is live. That's definitely a huge source. There's licensing and sync. So anytime your song is featured in a Netflix show or a movie, that generates quite a bit of revenue. But then there's also like crowdfunding and fan support, which is pretty big in Asia. It's not as big in the Western markets, but and then finally there's publishing. So every time your song is played like on the TV or something like that, you also get a different kind of royalty called a publishing royalty. So there's lots of different ways.
Yeah. You mentioned Taylor Swift. So she's been on this campaign almost, or to re-record her albums, apparently to gain more control over the music rights. So can you tell us a bit about why she's doing this?
Yeah, definitely. So I think that she's kind of brought to light this very interesting nuance in the music industry, which is this idea of the masters. So like in the industry, there's different kinds of royalties, but two of the big ones are masters and publishing. So the masters is like the actual song itself, like the creation of that song. So it's hard to explain without the CD, right? So it's just like the recording. The publishing side of it is actual composition of the song. So if someone, like I decided to do a cover of one of Taylor Swift's songs, like Blank Space, and I release it on Spotify, I'm legally allowed to do that, but she would still get the money from the publishing side. That's how you make sure that her composition, the song itself, like the composition of the song, goes to her. What happens with the masters is oftentimes they're owned by the record label. So with her, it was owned by a group called Big Machine Label Group, which then sold to a company owned by Scooter Braun, who she did not like and she didn't agree with. So she tried to buy back her masters. They wouldn't let her. And in her contract, it said that she could re-record them. So she did. And basically what that means is it's not the same as when they first recorded it in the studio. She re-recorded it, but had the producers make it sound exactly like, or very close to how it used to sound. And now she owns 100% and she gets 100% of the money going from each stream of that song.
And of course, when it comes to the streaming companies, it's interesting to see which version they promote if you just ask Spotify through an Alexa or something to play a Taylor Swift album, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a super good point. I was just reading an article that was kind of flagging how much power Spotify has. Spotify is called a DSP. Those are all the distributors of music. So you've got Spotify, Apple, Amazon, YouTube, but they have a lot of power. And so what song they choose to play, you're right, decides who gets the money in that case.
We have a question from Katikization on YouTube, who's watching this on YouTube. He says, or she says, growing up, I saw a lot of piracy in the music industry, but today, almost every kind of music is available on music streaming services like YouTube, Spotify, and Amazon Music. Is piracy now less rampant than before?
Definitely. It's definitely less rampant because it's not as necessary. You can listen to any song you want for free right now, wherever you are in the world, whether you're using YouTube and you have to listen to ads, or you're getting Spotify free and you have to listen to ads, or you've got Spotify Premium and you can play it on demand. So, I mean, I remember I had a few laptops die because of LimeWire. Not proud of it. I'm not proud that I was a participant, but like, it's just not convenient. So it's not, I mean, I would say that maybe there is piracy still in some emerging markets where people sell, bootleg CDs or something like that, but I wouldn't say that on a digital sense it's as rampant.
We were talking before the show that my first album that I bought was on a pirated cassette, basically in Singapore. And I remember it lasted for about 2 years before heat and humidity meant that the tape reel just blew up on me. So yes, I think streaming for all the, there's pros and cons, but on one hand, there is this durability angle to it. Mira, We also have a question from Deborah Rose on YouTube. How do independent labels generate revenue?
Yeah, good question. I mean, they generate revenue the same way as the majors. It's about finding music, and then you will own 50% of the masters or more. Like for Snafu, we usually do a 50-50 deal with the artist, which is very artist friendly. A lot of labels will do 70% of the masters. So each time the song is streamed, the label would get 70% of that streaming income from that master side of things. And so the question is like, how do you make sure your artist gets a lot of streams? And that's where the independent label, like that's their job, is to make sure that song blows up.
You mentioned Snafu, which is the record, the company that you work for, and I know it has a very interesting proposition involving AI. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, definitely. Well, Snafu was started by our awesome CEO, Ankit Desai, who kind of recognized there was a gap in how music was sourced, so or like discovered. A&R, which stands for artist and repertoire, that's sort of like the industry or the section of the music industry in charge of discovering artists and finding talent. And like the romantic notion of it was back in the day, like maybe there'd be an A&R sitting in the corner of some bar in Nashville and he'd find the next big country star, or she'd find the next big pop star in a bar in LA. But obviously, with 100,000 songs a day being released on the platforms now, I think it was 60,000 songs a day, like even a few years ago. So it's just increased in a crazy amount. It's impossible to like listen to every single song, and there might be someone, the premise of Snafu was there might be the most incredibly talented girl in Indonesia making music in her bedroom, but no one can find her. The data can. If you see a spike in, user listens or comments, or you can qualify the type of comment, like it allows you to identify what talent's going to blow up before it does. And so that was Snafu's original premise, was let's find these undervalued artists or before they blow up, and help them on their career to success. We've had a pivot in the past, I would say, year towards focusing a little bit more on the catalog side. And so we still use AI. And we still, to some degree use it for that reason, but we use it to find undervalued catalog now. So music that's already been released, and then value it and then help keep growing it even more.
I know this valuation algorithm is probably the secret sauce that you can't reveal, but what are some of the things that would give you an indication that an artist's back catalog is undervalued or underutilized?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, to some degree, I think all catalog is a bit undervalued. I mean, using the example of Taylor Swift, her catalog was undervalued 3 years ago because now she's a billionaire, right? She literally has launched this tour and kept re-recording and doing remixes. So that's ways that you can grow catalog. But what we look for, kind of to your question, is I guess a few factors. Vintage, so that's like the age of the catalog. We look for stickiness. We look for, if there was a big spike that then went down. We look for ratio of followers on Spotify to listeners. Because the idea is if there's a lot of listeners on Spotify but not a lot of followers, the artist could do a better job of engaging with the artist on like a personal level. So those are some of the factors that we look at.
Deborah again asked, so how much promotion does Snafu do?
I guess I would need to understand a little bit more about what that question means, like promotion of catalog, or I'll just assume the question means how much marketing of catalog do we do. That's a big part of our business model. That's what something we're really proud of, and we're constantly also innovating and using tech to try to find better ways to promote catalog. The cool thing about TikTok, I would say, is that it's really brought to light this idea that music is music and catalog is music. I mean, you saw the video of that guy drinking cranberry juice, longboarding, and that blew that, song up again. And no one could have expected that. Ace of Base, for example, we've been talking to them. They've had a bunch of their songs blow up in Latin America on TikTok, but they didn't even do anything for that. And it was like, TikTok really demonstrates that music is evergreen. And so I would say a lot of promotion that we do is helping artists learn how to generate TikTok content. And a big part of that is letting artists and everyone know like TikTok is no longer 13-year-olds just dancing. Like you can surely find that, but like one of my favorite examples is we have like a 70-year-old classical pianist. She listened to our promotion team and literally just set up a camera of her playing piano. Didn't have any TikTok followers or Instagram live followers. One of her reels blew up to 400K views just organically. So like anyone can be part of TikTok, and it's really important for artists to grow their catalogs, I would say.
Mm. It's interesting you bring up TikTok because if Snafu is trying to use data metrics, AI to find that kind of under the radar catalog stuff, wouldn't someone like TikTok have a bigger advantage because they have first party data about streams and what people are listening to?
Yes, but we have access to data, some data on TikTok as well. So we can see which songs are getting a lot of plays on TikTok and whatnot.
Mm.
But
Mm.
I would say there's two parts to this like promotion. There's like the discovery side, and then there's the promotion side, sorry, to AI. And so like our strategies do utilize not exclusively, but often TikTok and Reels, and using data and analytics to help artists do that intelligently.
Mm. You mentioned this thing about how people in their bedroom suddenly are making music. Could anyone have predicted that a song like Old Town Road with Lil Nas X could have just blown up to where it is through TikTok?
I don't think the industry was really ready for that, to be honest. I mean, maybe, but it's such a reality that that all the major players understand that it needs to be a crucial part of strategies.
Mm. And it, we talked before as well, the show, that music nowadays has broken down a lot of barriers in terms of genres. Right? And I think Old Town Road is a great example because Lil Nas X, he's black, he's gay, he loves country music, but he also loves hip hop. And I'm quite sure the people in Nashville just couldn't compute all of that, right? And yet he used, or at least he used TikTok to break free. Do you see that kind of story playing out more and more through streaming?
Absolutely. Like there's a big discussion in the music industry that genre is becoming less relevant. And in the new Beyonce country album, there's even like a little like spoken word riff on that. How genre is like, what does genre even mean? I think one of the benefits of social media, because I know we often talk about the downsides of it, one of the benefits is this globalization, which allows collaborators to work together, hear different sounds that they might have never been exposed to. Um, I'm a huge fan of genre bending. Like some of my favorite songs, including a lot written and produced by the best Swedish, producers in the world, they use riffs from like old Bollywood songs. Like Toxic has like an old Bollywood sample in it. So I don't know. I think that it makes it spicy. It makes it interesting. Like this genre melding is, I'm a huge fan of it, and I think it's not going away.
Mm. We have a question from Saswati. I'm not quite sure what she's getting at, but see if you can understand this part. Saswati asks that artists worldwide have issues around making money over time, other than the very famous ones like Taylor Swift or Beyonce. So Bollywood Bebop is very popular. How is there a way to ensure that artists from different regions get their fair share of money as
Yeah.
well?
No, it's a great question. And this is something that's really difficult for us because I'm half Indian, our CEO is from India. Like we love Indian music, Bebop, all that type of catalog. But often when we're valuing a catalog from India, what we find is the majors own all of it outright. And the model in India is actually pay for hire. So, one of the best producers in the world might just get paid, a flat fee to make a song rather than having a share in it long term. And that's very much driven by Bollywood, the industry, like the film industry. So that's a whole topic that I could get into, but I think that in India in particular, I am seeing like a lot more independent artists come up. There's starting to be a burgeoning independent creator scene. Um, so I think it's around the corner, but you know, the way that it started in India in particular was very movie driven. So they have a lot more power, which automatically means there's an inequity, right?
And Zayula on LinkedIn asks, will AI amplify intellectual property violations?
Probably. Like, I feel like AI is such a big hot word right now that it could mean so many different things. And I mean, we haven't even set the rules for it yet or seen how it's going to play out, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot of fights over it before we come up with like the systems that are going to be there moving forward.
And for better or worse, we still have to debate about this AI Drake song that blew up for a while.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
listeners don't know what I'm talking about, just Google it. But on AI itself, does it mean that some genres, and I know you mentioned genres as a term is going to go away, but some types of music could easily just be replaced by AI, isn't it? I'm thinking of all the chill mix playlists that you find, or the kind of lo-fi thing that my daughter puts on while she's studying. Would that
Yep.
just disappear from human creation?
I think it's, I think, I guess one, this is like maybe a personal thing. I think it's interesting that we try to differentiate AI and human creation a little bit because it is going to be a human telling the AI what to make still. And it is still going to be humans consuming it. So there will still be a human element in it. But I think the way I think about it is like the same way that I might think about um, even like, for example, graphic design. Like nowadays, I can go and like generate a logo for free using an AI generator. That doesn't mean I'm not going to use a designer all the time, but just for some of those more simple tasks, I might. Same, I think, is going to apply for music. Like, and I think we're already seeing it start to be reflected in royalty payouts through DSPs. Like, I do think they're going to start paying some of those like more mood music a lower rate because I do understand that it will be AI generated more and more. So I definitely think like a lot of like maybe brands that need like an elevator music or something like that, they're just going to turn to AI. I don't think that's the end of the world though. Like it means there's going to be some reallocation of talent within the music industry, but um, yeah, I'm actually quite hopeful for how AI is going to help music creation itself.
Tim on LinkedIn asks, and I'm going to summarize it a bit, but basically, how do you in Snafu distinguish between artists that go viral but then don't have a very long career runway after that, versus those who maybe become viral and become very popular and have the potential to have a long music career?
I think there's a lot to unpack in that question. The first thing is I maybe just start with is that we really believe in the human like robot connection. Like it can't just be an AI making every decision. Every single artist that we talk to, we talk to with an A&R and we look at it as a team and we use our human mind to think, okay, thank you for giving us these recommendations. Let's get on the phone with them and see what they're like. And that is so much of what what music can make it in the long run because I think even that concept is so artist driven, right? Like if an artist is engaging with fans and building real followers, that music can be viable in the long run. Versus if they're just making it to buy and put out streams, then of course that's going to be a fad. So I think a lot of it is even just like personality driven by artists themselves. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but that's how I look at it.
You mentioned that a lot of the work in Snafu is involves with artists, getting them more prominent on TikTok, right? So how does Snafu work with them to get more popular on TikTok? Is it about the kinds of music that they should be producing? Is it the videos? Is it engagement?
Yeah. Well, kind of to Tim's point, like how do we make sure a song is gonna not just have a viral moment? It's the mantra for us is fan creation. Like so much revenue is driven by such a small percentage of mega fans. We call them super fans. The more of those you can make, the better. And you have to be authentic. We would never tell an artist what kind of music to make because that needs to feel authentic to them, right? But we could tell them, hey, like you should try making content like this. And if it feels authentic to you, we'll look at the stats and we follow like the iterate repeat. So like TikTok is interesting because it's like concentric circles. So it pushes a piece of content to a test audience of like let's say 200. Once those 200 have engaged with it, it'll push it to an audience of 800. Once those have engaged with it, 1,000, 10, so that's why you see kind of these plateaus on TikTok views if you've ever played with TikTok. So what we encourage artists to do, using Fiona as an example, we were like, hey, what do you feel comfortable with? Like you're an older woman, like we're not going to ask you to do dances or anything inauthentic. If you just feel comfortable like playing piano, do that. And let's try different angles and settings and, ways of introducing it to see if it breaks that test audience. And then whenever you find one that breaks that audience, like breaks that circle, so, oh, this one got 800 views instead of 200, do more of that. And then keep experimenting within that little niche. Do more of whatever keeps breaking out. That's why you see the best creators, they have like a thing. They have like something that the algorithm pushed out that people engage with a lot, and then they usually capitalize on that thing and get really strong at like that type of music, like video creation. So that's kind of what we help our artists do. And the goal is to make the audience feel like they could be your friend, and the goal is to interact with them and to like really make them connect with you on a human level.
Mira, I know you're very passionate about advancing women in the music industry, whether it's artists or executives. Can you talk about this Women's Creative Fund that you also manage?
Yeah, definitely. So our main business is we have a fund that we use to give, short-term license royalties like on it, like advances to. So we reserved 1 million of that fund for women creators because we were looking at the data and our roster, and we found that about like 20% of our roster was women. And so what that means is that we're going to actively try to recruit more women to join our fund and for us to give advances to. And once we do get them, we're going to actively try to build mentorship programs, um, cohorts which they can have songwriting camps or production collaborations within to kind of help amplify that women power aspect even more.
Why do you think it's the case that women are not as prominent in the music industry?
I mean, I guess, there's the usual suspects like across the entire world. Like we could ask the same question about any industry. So whatever the answers for any other industry would be, I would say them, but then it's actually amplified by a few factors. One of which is that production, like being a producer, is starting to be one of the more important elements of being an artist. And that's a very technical, almost like computer sciencey type role, which women are not really encouraged to go for. So there's a lot more men producers, like even songwriters, engineers than women. Another aspect of why I think it's particularly maybe worse in the music industry is that it's a very network driven industry. And as you know, like networking inherently can amplify bias. And so the third element I think that goes into it is sort of just like the way that women have been historically portrayed in music industry. Like when you think, if I asked you to name 3 female artists right now, you would probably name Taylor Swift,
Beyonce, Taylor
Beyonce.
Swift, Olivia Rodrigo.
Yeah. And they're all heteronormally gorgeous. They're all like very, catering towards, and it's not like any downplay on them, but like a certain type of look and a certain type of performative experience for the audience. Men aren't forced to do that as much. So because of that, there's a lot more harassment. There's a lot more like kind of danger for even artists within the music industry. The amount of stories I've heard where female artists have like had a sketchy story with a producer in a studio late at night. I mean, it is just there. So that's another element I think that causes it to be a little bit more unequal.
You talked about the gender imbalance on the artist and the music creation side, have you also seen gender imbalance on the business side of the music industry?
Definitely that as well. I'm very fortunate to work at an amazing company that's almost like 50-50. And I think there are a lot of really amazing female executives out there, but I mean, it's the same as with any other industry, right? Like the usual suspects come into play with having children or being able to work super late hours because music in general, like you're expected to go to gigs or you might have to have client calls around the world. So it naturally lends itself a little bit to like the later side, which might discourage, female executives from climbing the ranks.
Mm. And so far, what's the results been from the women's fund that is part of the overall song fund that you have?
Yeah, I mean, we're just getting started, so we're still trying to encourage more women to join the fund and, onboard more of them. And then for the ones that we do have, we've already had a few amazing executives from some majors and elsewhere asked to be mentors. So we're setting our female artists up in women mentorship. And we're also, asking other companies that do this female mentorship within the music industry to tap into their network. So we're really working on like providing that value.
Mm. Going back to AI and algorithms, you talk about how TikTok is now such a huge factor in an artist's popularity. And Kartika on YouTube asks, does AI or the algorithm focus more on promoting catchy music or beats than vocals?
I mean, the AI doesn't have like a motive. It's gonna continue to push to where engagement is a bit more. So sometimes an artist's vocals will catch people's eyes. Sometimes the melody will. It just depends on the song. Um, I mean, one of our investors and a really amazing songwriter and producer here, he was saying that there's a few different ways an artist can break through the noise, and one of them is to have a super unique voice that is, I mean, Ariana Grande is a great example. Like Kesha had a really weird voice, Kendrick Lamar, I feel like has a unique voice. Like all the big stars that you hear, they have a very different type of voice or, special, unique voice. But then a lot of the other hits are just awesome compositions, awesome production, awesome songwriting. So there's a lot of elements that could go into it. I would say that like one thing I always try to reiterate is AI is just like crystallizing what humans are doing, right? So if a human is skipping a song a little bit faster, it's just bringing that to the light. It's not coming into it with any like we only want to make catchy songs.
Mm. You mentioned this part about humans skipping a song just a couple of seconds faster. And I know that, especially with streaming, you only get paid if someone listens the first 30 seconds. And that affected the way that people wrote songs because they had to pack everything in the first 30 seconds. Have you
Yeah.
seen people approach the music creation process differently because of, let's say,
Hmm.
TikTok and to try to appeal or to be much more sticky on TikTok?
That's a great question. I would say there's obviously a downside to this like fast consumer culture that we have with all of our content, right? Like if something doesn't wow us within the first 30 seconds in any capacity, pretty much like we're not interested in it. The cool thing about TikTok though is that you don't only play the first 30 seconds of a song. You can pick which hook you want to have. So like I know like Hosier, like he has like that hook in his new song about coffee, whatever. If you guys know it, you know it. But like they use that clip to promote the song, not the beginning of the song. But because that hook got people, then they went and streamed the whole song. So yeah, I mean, I think obviously probably in general everything in the world is created to be more addictive, but I don't see it like being a huge factor in people's creative process. At least not that I know of.
Mm. Deborah on YouTube asks, what's your training? Was it marketing comms, storytelling, branding, SEO?
Like my education.
I think it's your education, work experience that helps you to do what you're doing now?
Yeah. I mean, this isn't going to be a random answer, so it might not be satisfactory. I mean, I grew up playing piano, and I'm very much a believer in de-siloing education. Like as a kid, I equally loved piano, math, art, writing. Like they were all my favorite subjects, history. I studied physics and economics in my undergrad, but I did my physics thesis as Stein Conrad in pianos. So it's always been like, I don't know, I've been trained in a bit of everything. And then in LA, I worked like on the startup, like COO side of scaling an art and media company. And then I did my MBA at Cambridge, and then I did a little bit of work for like a celebrity vocal coach in London. I did a little bit for a PR agency, and then yeah, I've been at Snafu. So it's a bit all over the place, but I think yeah, I mean it's just about understanding people and how people and patterns are so interchangeable, right?
Was there anything on the MBA that you learned that you now use in your role in Snafu?
Mm. It's so funny, but I feel like we learned the phrase "your world is not my world." And that has been like the most life-changing phrase to me. And like the most, I mean, we obviously did a lot more deep work around that topic and what that meant for cultural, like, business integration and amongst other things. But I think just remembering that has really helped me have conversations with all different kinds of people, relate to artists as much as I could to like managers, executives, digital players in the industry. Um, Especially because we work with such a global roster, like everybody's so different. So that's definitely one of the most important like soft skills that I learned from the MBA for sure. And like financial like looking at our portfolio using like our finance knowledge from the MBA.
You talk about finance, and I know in the last couple of years there's been a huge increase in people trying to get more commercial revenue out of things like back catalogs. So you had, I think it's the estate of David Bowie selling or something like that, right? These artists with long back catalogs selling to financial, sometimes private equity firms. How do you see that trend in terms of the revenue streams for music artists? Is this something that they could be doing a lot more of?
Yeah, I mean that's what we do now. We've pivoted really into our main model now is we give short-term advances on short-term licenses for artists up to 5 years. So that's not a full-on buyout, so they keep their music at the end of the term, so it's very artist friendly. But I think like the big recognition has been that we should start thinking of music as an asset that can be capitalized upon, and that it is recession, like it's a non-correlated asset, so it does not vary with recessions. It's very, it's great to diversify a portfolio with. So there's a lot of players now that are doing these full-on buyouts, and we're playing in the short-term licensing game, which is similar. And I definitely think like it's gotten artists to think a little bit more of their catalogs as an asset, which is really important because 75% of streaming is catalog.
Some of these firms, the big ones, haven't been doing that well. I'm thinking of like Hypnosis, I think, who has really struggled. Uh, why has that happened? Is it something to do with the underlying financials or the economics?
Yeah, I feel like what I'll say is this. Like there are different levels of like depth that you can look into the economics behind a catalog and ways that you can project what they're going to make. I think Hypnosis went maybe a little bit riskier. I don't know personally, but I think they maybe were a bit riskier than maybe to make a statement a little bit more as well. So that's maybe why they're not doing as well. Like for our fund, I know that we try to make the most realistic offers we can. And we'll often come in lower than other competitors. And sometimes we're like, how are these competitors offering this much for this period? Like how is that possible? So I do think there's like a lot of like it's like this exciting Wild West industry right now. And I think, some people are being a bit more risk seeking. And we'll see how that plays out in the next few years.
Mira, you're a big music lover. Uh, has working in the music industry made you love music more or less?
Definitely more. It's so cool to talk to artists, and it's so cool to see what goes on behind the scene. Yeah, especially like sometimes you get on the phone with like these really big rock, these heavy metal bands, and they're just like the sweetest men you've ever met. Like they're so kind and gentle. So it's really fun. It's making me like it more for sure.
So they don't ask you for like different kinds of specific kinds of fruit to put in the green room before they perform,
No,
or
they're
they'll
honestly.
throw a TV out or something.
I have not had that happen. Maybe I'm not doing it right though.
One last audience question. Will record labels or companies find it difficult to stay profitable if a majority of artists start uploading their music directly on streaming apps?
So there's something called a distributor. We didn't really get into that, but a distributor's role is just to upload songs, like connect the song from the artist to all the DSPs. What's been happening that's kind of interesting is a lot of like big distributors, they just do that, like CD Baby or DistroKid. You can upload it for a small fee or for a really low percentage. But then artists are like, well, we actually do want our songs to be pitched to playlists. We do want our songs to have a bit of a team behind it. So it's like things got de-integrated and they're slowly kind of reintegrating into what the record labels used to be. So like you have these like high-end distribution companies like Believe or 1RPM, or to some degree a little bit like what we do. We offer label style services, to artists in exchange for distribution or in advance. So I mean, I think the artists that want to distribute on their own, they will. But ultimately, with 100,000 songs a day being uploaded, I think a lot of them are seeing that they do need a bit of like expert support.
Mm, okay. Well, thank you, Mira, for that great conversation. And we
Thank
wish you all
you.
the success, especially on the Women's Fund. We'd love to have, obviously, more people making different kinds of music that all of us can enjoy.
Thank you so much. And thanks for having me. It's been really fun chatting.
And the balance sheet will be back on the 14th of June. It's the same time when we'll look at agribusiness in Africa. So till then, stay well, stay safe, and see you next time.